A huge thank you to patron Noreen23505 for suggesting today's video topic. If you want to suggest a topic for next Wednesday's Name Explain video, all you have to do is support Name Explain on Patreon for $1 a month. Find out more by visiting patreon.com/nameexplain, which will be linked down below. Anyway, the word rhyme has its ultimate origins with the Greek word of rhythmos, which means a measured flow and movement. This, however, comes from a Proto-Indo-European fragment meaning to flow, which interestingly enough is the same route the Rhine River that sprawls across Europe gets its name from too, as it's a flowing river, which explains why Rhine and rhyme rhyme. Rhyming is language at perhaps its most playful. Taking words that sound alike to varying degrees and putting them in tandem with one another has created some of the most celebrated poetry and songs on our planet. It really is an art form unto itself. But even so, sometimes when we're just speaking, we accidentally say a rhyme, which normally gets a giggle out of the person who said it. While we all know about the obvious rhymes like cat and hat, hop and pop, hunches and bunches, and all the other ones Dr. Seuss churned out, there are actually a huge amount of rhyming styles out there, some a tad more abstract than others. The ones I just mentioned we would refer to as perfect rhymes. Perfect rhymes are pretty much the textbook rhymes, when the words have the same sound and length but aren't identical to one another. Yet we can also rhyme the exact same word with itself too. These are known as identical rhymes. This might sound odd, but they're used way more than you might expect. Like in Hey Jude, better is rhymed with better. If some of the most celebrated songwriters on the planet can get away with identical rhymes, then it must be fine. When two words kind of sound the same but aren't exactly one-to-one in their pronunciation or spelling, we call it an imperfect or slant rhyme. Think of thumb and gun, or engine and orange. They kind of sound the same but they aren't perfect. Then we have something like a rich rhyme. This is when two words sound pretty much the same as one another but have different spellings and meanings, e.g. homonyms. Take something like hair as in the thing on people's heads and hair as in the weird looking bunny thing. Masculine rhymes and feminine rhymes are terms more linked with poetry and songs, as opposed to just words that sound alike in general. A masculine rhyme is when the rhyming word comes at the end of a line, while a feminine rhyme comes before the end of a line. I'm sure you can think of plenty of examples of masculine rhymes, which are also known as end rhymes, but a great example of a feminine rhyme I found comes from Billie Eilish's Bad Guy. During the chorus, the words tough, rough, enough, and puff are all rhymed together, and none of these words are at the end of their lines. Light or wrenched rhymes really make us play with pronunciation to create similar sounds between words. This is when we rhyme a word with another word where the rhyming part tends to not be stressed naturally, like the words of mat and combat. If we want these words to rhyme, we really have to stress the bat part of combat. Then there's also internal rhymes. This is once again used more in poetry and songwriting, and it's when we rhyme two words within the same line. Take a song like Don't Stop Believing. The single line of "a singer in a smoky room, the smell of wine and cheap perfume" rhymes room and perfume together in one line. These are also slant rhymes too, so it's an internal slant rhyme. Yeah, all these different kinds of rhymes can be used in conjunction with one another if you want to get really creative. What we can say, however, is that all these kinds of rhymes do rhyme and sound alike to varying degrees. Yet there is one other kind of rhyme out there, and the strangest thing about these quote-unquote rhyming words is the fact they don't actually rhyme at all. These being a selection of words known as eye rhymes, or sight rhymes, or visual rhymes. These are words that on paper look like they should rhyme because they're spelt in a similar way, but when said out loud sound little to nothing alike. Take the words of bead and dead. They both end EAD, so when written it seems that they really should be said in the same way, but in reality they don't sound all that alike at all. Then there's also words like kind and wind, word and sword, tricked and wicked. All these examples look like they should be perfect rhymes, though of course we don't say dead as deed. Many native English speakers will be well aware of the fact that these words don't rhyme despite looking like they should. This is simply because they would have been exposed to these words most of their life, so would have the fact that they don't rhyme crammed into their brain. But if you are learning English as a non-native speaker, they must be incredibly confusing and hard to wrap your head around. Most other languages have ways to avoid words looking the same on paper despite being said differently. This is done with the likes of accent marks on certain letters. English, however, doesn't do this. You just have to know and remember how certain words are said. English could really benefit from the whole accent mark thing, which is something we've discussed in the past. There's one key reason as to why English is littered with words that look like they should rhyme but don't, and that's because in the past, many of these words actually did rhyme with one another. Take these lines from Shakespeare's Hamlet. "The great man down, you mark his favourite flies. The poor advanced makes friends of enemies. When this line was first written by the bard, flies and enemies would have sounded alike in some English language dialects. What sounded like what, however, I'm not sure. Maybe flies sounded like enemies, e.g. fleas, or maybe enemies sounded like flies, e.g. enemies. Whatever the case, these two words don't sound all that similar today. So what happened to make them stop sounding so alike? Well, the Great Vowel Shift happened. This was a period of time that extended from the 12th to 18th century, but the bulk of it took place during the 15th and 16th, which saw the sounds various vowels make change in English. We don't know why exactly this happened, but seemingly over a long period of history, people just started saying vowels differently. Seriously, I've had to try and explain the Great Vowel Shift in multiple videos now, and every time it's left me confused. But all we really need to know is that it resulted in words that once sounded alike sounding different, but the spelling for some reason never changed to represent these new sounds. These pairs of words that look like they should rhyme but don't, but once upon a time did, have a name unto themselves. They are known as historic rhymes. Yet, not all I rhymes in English are historic rhymes. Some of these words seemingly never sounded alike despite having similar spellings. This is most likely due to the huge selection of languages that have shaped English. While English is primarily a Germanic tongue, it has been influenced by Romance languages like Latin and French. This has resulted in English having a wide variety of words from these different languages. And these languages often use the same combination of letters in their written form, but those letter combinations don't sound alike when said out loud. Take the words of card and forward. They both end ARD, but don't sound alike unless we really want to go our way to pronounce forward as forward, which would make it a wrenched rhyme. This is because they both come from different origins. Card is of French origin, while forward is of Germanic. Things like this also explain to us why I-rhymes can come into being too. This video has mainly focused on I-rhymes in English, so I decided to see if they occurred in other languages too, and from what I could gather they aren't too abundant. I did some digging around online and not much came up. I even asked ChatGPT for some examples, and while it gave me a boatload that claimed were I-rhymes in languages like French, German, Portuguese and Dutch, none of them actually were. Like it claimed the Portuguese pouco and louco were I-rhymes, but that simply isn't the case. Stay classy and accurate as always, ChatGPT. As mentioned, the main reason why I-rhymes aren't as commonplace in other languages is probably because most languages have things like accent marks that let readers know when a word is said in a different way. So I-rhymes really do not rhyme. Yet when you look at lists of different rhymes, they are always amongst the likes of perfect and slant rhymes. Why do they get to be considered rhymes despite the fact they do not sound alike at all? Well, it's because rhyming is often used in poetry and music, and as these are creative fields, people like to get creative with the words they use. This includes using I-rhymes in their work for various reasons. In poetry especially, they are fun to use, as in many cases poems are represented in their written form just as much as they are spoken aloud. I-rhymes can be used in poetry for all kinds of effects. In many cases it can even be quite humorous. Take the poem I Rhyme Blues by Josie Holford. When read, many of the words look like they should rhyme, but in reality, it's a different story entirely. It reads as, if you are feeling down and rough, perhaps you have a nasty cough, and think your life is in a bind, and your fortune's gone with the wind. You feel you're cooked, like a goose, with very little left to choose, like a bottle that's popped its cork, tired of all the tedious work. Things couldn't really get much worse. You're in a race without a horse. You just want to fall on your sword. So I offer you this cheering word. Things might be worse, they really could, in the ground and covered in mould. It's true, you feel it like a wound, but still, joy really can be found. But do not ask me where or how. Today I'm feeling rather low. This is a fantastic creative use of I-rhymes, and it shows us why we can consider them rhymes, despite the fact they don't actually rhyme. Name Explained depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explained videos, and your name at the end of the video with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/NameExplain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm NameExplainYT, and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and once again, thank you all so much.